Good morning, everybody. It's about 11:30 a.m. This is Barrett Pollard, Superintendent of Gatesville ISD. Had a couple of very important updates for our students and families and the community at large. A couple of big topics. One, I wanted to give a quick summary of how our students did academically the first 9 weeks of school, the good and the bad. And then secondly, a COVID update. We've had a spike in cases here, unfortunately, and we've had a normal first 3 months of school, but now things are starting to kick up as far as COVID, and we need to give an update on that as well. So I'll try to be brief, but again, please watch this to the end because it does have a lot of important information in it. First of all, very quickly, looking at the first 9 week reporting period, how did students do on the report card? We've had a lot of students struggling at each campus. I have some statistics here just to kind of share with our families in general. And none of these decisions have been made yet, but already at the primary school with our youngest students, there's already a handful of kids looking at for retention. And most of those students, all of them had been virtual or remote at one point. Same at elementary school, about 6 students looking at for retention already. Again, decisions haven't been made, but all those students were doing remote learning. So they're struggling with that learning model is basically the point. Looking at the older students here at intermediate, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, 19% of those kids failed at least one subject. And of those kids who failed, a little more than half had been virtual at some point or another. So again, it's not just virtual students doing poorly, and we have some virtual students that are doing fantastically, but I wanted to give our community kind of an overview of how things are going. Working our way on up, junior high, 7th and 8th grade, 21% of our junior high students failed one or more subjects, and about 37% of those had been virtual. But high school probably had the most telling numbers, and these are fairly staggering failure rates. 35% of all of our high school kids failed at least one subject. So if you were to randomly pick 3 kids there, at least one of them failed something. And of those who failed, more than 2/3, 67%, had been a virtual student at some point. So all that to say is that when you go to the remote learning, it's difficult for students to have the self-motivation and independence oftentimes needed to be successful at that. So, we're having conversations with a lot of students and families about, returning to campus to be more successful. Before this recent uptick in COVID, I really was hoping that in the spring, if we really had been successful with COVID, we could come back to in-person for most all of our students. But we'll talk about that more here in a minute. Another statistic in the first quarter, out of the 104 high school students that made the 120 A honor roll students, 104 of those had been in person. So only 16 that made the A honor roll were virtual. And this is the most telling statistic. All of last year, our social workers had referred about 37 students to outside counseling for big issues that required counseling beyond what our counselors could provide on issues like depression, drug use, violence in the home. In August and September of this year alone, just those 2 months, those social workers had already referred over 45 students to outside counseling for the same reason. So again, our community, like so many others, struggling with this COVID pandemic and all the different nuisances and aggravations that comes along with it. And so again, our students are dealing with some big issues. So I say all that to tell you that, we're wanting to get on a trajectory of coming back in person for most all of our students. But now, since November has hit, we've had a spike in cases. So to give you some COVID data, we started school back on August 13th. And through Halloween, all of October, we only had 17 cases, 12 students, 5 staff, and all of them recovered, came back to school, came back to work. So we had fantastic numbers. Then November hits, and we slowly start having this acceleration of numbers. And so right now we're up to 31 active cases. And we'll show you how that breaks down here in a minute, but 15 of those have been just since Saturday. So we used to get phone calls from Coryell Memorial with 1 case, 2 case. Now we're getting emails with lists of kids that have been diagnosed. And it wouldn't be such a big issue, but for each one of those kids that are positive, it has a ripple effect with contact tracing on other kids that have to quarantine. And so it really begins to hurt your ability to have school because teachers have to quarantine, students have to quarantine. We already have very few substitutes that are willing to work during this time because of COVID. And so we become shorthanded. So looking at those 31 cases that have happened here just recently, uh, it's interesting. The younger kids are not as affected by it. Primary, 2 students, 0 staff. Elementary, no students, no staff have it right now. Intermediate, 2 students, 3 staff. But then you start to get to junior high, and we've had 7 students that have contracted it. And unfortunately, sometimes these students are in extracurriculars, football, band, and so then that cuts a wider swath of students that have to go home. High school is struggling the most with that. 11 students, 6 staff members, and again, it's impacting band members and football players and basketball players. And so you look at it, we've got 2,850 kids approximately and about 400 staff members. So still 31 cases, that's a little under 1%. But when you start counting all the students who've been quarantined, it's really hard to do school. And so our fear is we have a lot of students in the pipeline to be tested, which we're fearful that's going to create more positives, more quarantining. And so what we're proposing to do is to take a few days off here. We were hoping to make it to Thanksgiving, but we're going to propose a long weekend coming up in order to try to get this under control. And so here's what we're proposing to stop the spread. First of all, Wednesday, we're going to cancel the Veterans Day program. That is too risky, we feel like, to have veterans coming into the school building, oftentimes in a at-risk age group. Also, we want those students who are going to read something that still have that opportunity. So what we're going to do is have them read their essays individually later on after we get through this. And I'll post those on our Facebook page so you can listen to our students who wrote some really good essays about Veterans Day. And that way we can still honor our vets, showcase our kids, and kind of go from there. So here's what we're proposing. We'll go to school like normal Wednesday, tomorrow. Thursday would be a student and staff holiday. So we would have no school, including no remote learning. So you don't have to worry about doing remote learning on Thursday. Now, if you want to get caught up on some things, if you're behind, that'd be fantastic, but we're not going to do anything new. The makeup day for that, if you recall on our calendar, we had some COVID makeup days, just like a bad weather day, will be January 4th. Friday, November 13th, again, another student and staff holiday. We don't want the staff coming up here. We don't want the students coming up here. That makeup day would be on March 15th. So again, January 4th and March 15th will convert to normal school days. They were supposed to be staff development days that came right after Christmas, right after spring break. We don't think that will be too taxing if we do just a normal school day those 2 days. And then Monday would be 1 day of virtual learning for all students. And I'm going to ask the staff to stay home, work from home, ask the kids, make sure you answer that one engagement question from each class so you get attendance credit. And I'm going to ask the staff to focus on really makeup work. The kids are behind or they've got missing assignments or low grade, work on that. So we're going to try to focus on catching kids up so we don't have so many failures. We're really trying to shut down the whole district during that time. Every building, every office, every facility, outside, gyms, football field. We're not going to serve meals. We don't think it's right or fair to have our cafeteria staff or maintenance staff come up here while everybody else is home. So everybody's going to be at home. So again, offices closed, facilities closed, no extracurricular activities. Now, here's where it gets really tough to tell you guys this, but we've had multiple football players come into contact, multiple coaches come into contact with COVID positive students. They're considered close contact, and now they're going to have to quarantine. And like a couple of games that happened earlier this year where other teams had to forfeit or canceled the game, the same thing is going to happen to us this Friday. We cannot play that playoff game. There's already been 9 other by-district football games here in the state canceled because of COVID, and we don't think it would be right or ethical to come to that game when we have, again, a lot of our coaching staff and key players and coaches that have been exposed. And so during this hiatus, Thursday through Monday, there won't be any sort of extracurricular activity. So if there was a seventh grade volleyball game, a band practice, anything going on has been canceled, including city events. We're not now, unless the city can find an alternate location. If there's any sort of football or city volleyball going on, that's going to be rescheduled or canceled or done some other time as well. We're trying to make sure that these buildings are free and clear of people, and if they have an opportunity for all of our students to kind of bounce back from what's happening. So then Tuesday, November 17th, we'll be back. So you'll have a 5-day weekend. Really, the Monday, the 5th day, is a work day for students to get on and do some work. But 5 days in a row, you'll be at home. And really, 5 days is pretty key when it comes to COVID, because it gives a window of time for students not to be around other students that have it. And so we're hoping that this will help stop the spread. And again, these aren't just asymptomatic cases. These are folks that are actually sick, and some of them are quite ill. And so we've got to be cautious, especially with our staff that maybe are in at-risk categories. And so we want to make sure that we keep them safe. So if you have questions or concerns, reach out to the school. Again, we've got all day normally tomorrow. We'll come to school, hopefully give you an opportunity to get childcare in place, and hopefully come back Tuesday and be ready for school, and then make it for 4 days to Thanksgiving. All right, I appreciate you guys listening, and we'll have more information for you later. Thanks a lot.